If you are naturally kind, this message is for you. And it may sting at first because everything you've been praised for might be the very thing that's been quietly costing you your power. You were told that kindness is strength, that being good will be rewarded, that the world bends toward fairness. But nobody told you what happens when your kindness meets someone who sees it not as virtue, but as an opportunity. Nobody warned you that in a world of incentives, strategies, and hidden motives, pure-hearted people are not celebrated. They are harvested. If you've ever felt drained after being the nice one, if you've ever watched less capable people climb higher simply because they were more ruthless, if you've ever wondered why doing the right thing keeps leaving you behind, then listen carefully. This is not about becoming evil. This is about surviving reality without losing your soul. Machiavelli understood something that most kind people are taught to ignore. He saw the world not as it should be, but as it is. He saw that power does not reward virtue. Power rewards effectiveness, and effectiveness often requires rules that feel dark to the innocent. The tragedy of the naturally kind person is that they walk into a battlefield carrying flowers, believing the war will pause to admire their beauty. It won't. The war will take the flowers, trample them into the mud, and move on without remembering your name. Kindness without awareness is not moral superiority. It is strategic blindness. You don't suffer because you are kind. You suffer because you are kind and naive. You assume others are like you. You assume that when you give, others will give back. You assume that when you are honest, others will be honest in return. You assume that when you show vulnerability, it will be respected. These assumptions feel noble, but they are not noble. They are dangerous. The world is not composed of one type of person. It is composed of players who understand leverage, image, timing, and advantage. When you show your hand too early, you don't prove your goodness. You reveal your position. The first dark rule you must learn is this: never confuse kindness with transparency. Being kind does not mean being an open book. The naturally kind person often believes that hiding intentions is manipulation, that keeping boundaries is deception, that protecting oneself is selfish. This belief turns them into an open field with no fences. Everyone can walk in. Everyone can take what they want. Everyone can leave footprints all over what you were trying to grow. Machiavelli warned that those who reveal themselves too fully lose the advantage of mystery, and mystery is power. When people cannot read you easily, they respect you more. When they cannot predict you easily, they are more careful around you. Transparency in a predatory environment is not honesty. It is exposure. Think about how often you explain yourself, how often you justify your decisions, how often you reveal your plans to people who have no stake in your success. You do this because you want to be understood, because you fear being seen as cold or calculating. But every unnecessary explanation is information you didn't need to give. Every revealed intention is a lever someone else can pull. The dark wisdom here is simple. Be kind in action, not in self-disclosure. You can treat people well without letting them inside your strategy. You can be generous without being predictable. You can be warm without being defenseless. Be honest with yourself and drop a true in the comments right now. If you know you are a chronic over-explainer, written admission does things nodding, simply can't. The second dark rule is this: assume incentives, not intentions. The kind-hearted person judges others by what they say. The strategic person judges others by what they stand to gain. You listen to promises, you listen to words, you listen to how people describe themselves, but Machiavelli would tell you to watch behavior under pressure. People reveal who they are when their comfort is threatened, when their status is challenged, when their gain is at stake. Music. Someone may speak the language of loyalty while quietly positioning themselves for advantage. Someone may speak the language of morality while exploiting every loophole they can find. This does not make them monsters. It makes them human. In a system that rewards outcomes, not purity, when you assume good intentions, you give people the benefit of the doubt. That sounds virtuous, but it often becomes a habit of self-betrayal. You ignore patterns because you want to believe in exceptions. You forgive behaviors that should have taught you boundaries. You interpret red flags as misunderstandings. The dark rule is not to become cynical. It is to become realistic. Watch what people consistently do when it costs them something to do the right thing. Watch how they behave when nobody is watching. Watch what they prioritize when two values collide. Incentives carve behavior. If someone benefits from your weakness, do not be surprised when they lean into it. The third dark rule is this: learn to be feared just enough that your kindness is respected. This is uncomfortable to hear if you've built your identity around being liked, but Machiavelli observed that it is safer to be feared than loved when you cannot be both. Fear here does not mean cruelty. It means consequence. It means that people know there is a line they cannot cross with you. The naturally kind person often has no line, or they have a line but it is invisible, soft and endlessly movable. People learn consciously or not how much they can take from you. They learn how late they can be, how much they can ask, how many times they can disappoint you before you finally speak up. When there is no consequence, your kindness becomes a resource to be mined. To be feared just enough means to be willing to withdraw access. To be willing to say no and let the silence stand. To be willing to let someone be uncomfortable with your boundary. To be willing to let someone misinterpret you as cold rather than continue to interpret you as exploitable. Fear in this sense is simply the awareness that actions have outcomes. When people know that crossing you costs them something, they begin to treat your kindness as a gift instead of an entitlement. Notice how often you overcompensate when you set a boundary. You explain, you apologize, you soften your tone until the boundary collapses under its own politeness. This teaches people that your no is negotiable. The dark rule is to let your no be heavy. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy enough that it lands. Your kindness should feel like sunlight in a room with walls, not like sunlight in an open desert where it evaporates into nothing. The fourth dark rule is this: do not rescue people who are invested in staying broken. This one will hurt the most. The naturally kind person is often drawn to the wounded, the struggling, the lost. You see potential where others see patterns. You invest energy, time, emotion, and sometimes resources into people who say they want to change. But wanting to change and being willing to change are not the same thing. Machiavelli would say that men are quick to promise and slow to deliver when it costs them comfort. If someone benefits from being rescued, they have no incentive to stop drowning. If someone benefits from being irresponsible because you will clean up the mess, they will keep making messes. You confuse compassion with self-sacrifice. You believe that if you just love harder, give more, stay longer, they will finally transform. But transformation requires friction. It requires discomfort. It requires the pain of consequence. When you remove consequence in the name of kindness, you remove the very pressure that could have created growth. This doesn't make you a villain. It makes you an enabler of stagnation. The dark rule is to let people feel the weight of their choices. You can care about someone and still let them face the outcomes of their behavior. You can support without carrying their entire burden on your back. Ask yourself how many times you've stayed in situations that drained you because you didn't want to abandon someone. Ask yourself how often you felt responsible for someone else's emotional stability. That responsibility was never yours to carry. When you carry it, you teach them that they don't need to carry themselves. Machiavelli's realism here is brutal but freeing. Your duty is not to save everyone. Your duty is to not lose yourself trying to save those who refuse to swim. The fifth dark rule is this: protect your image as carefully as you protect your intentions. Naturally, kind people often believe that image is shallow, that reputation is superficial, that being real matters more than being perceived well. But in the real world, perception is leverage. People do not interact with your inner truth. They interact with the story they have of you in their minds. Machiavelli understood that power is not just what you do, but how what you do is seen. If you allow yourself to be framed as weak, naive, endlessly forgiving, you invite treatment that matches that frame. If you allow yourself to be framed as competent, discerning, and quietly formidable, your kindness is interpreted as choice, not obligation. This does not mean becoming fake. It means becoming intentional about what you project. If you always present yourself as endlessly available, people will treat your time as disposable. If you always present yourself as endlessly patient, people will test the limits of that patience. If you always present yourself as endlessly forgiving, people will gamble with your forgiveness. The dark wisdom is to let your reputation include boundaries, standards, and consequences. Let people know without speeches that your kindness exists within a structure. Structure is what turns goodness into strength. The tragedy of the kind-hearted person is not that they care too much. It is that they care without strategy. They give without leverage. They trust without filters. They forgive without recalibration. They reveal without restraint. They rescue without conditions. In a world shaped by incentives, this is not virtue. It is vulnerability. Machiavelli would not ask you to abandon your kindness. He would ask you to armor it. He would ask you to stop treating goodness as a performance and start treating it as a position of power. When your kindness is chosen rather than automatic, it becomes rare. When it becomes rare, it becomes valuable. When it becomes valuable, it is respected. You were never meant to harden your heart. You were meant to sharpen your perception. There is a difference. A hardened heart closes. A sharpened perception sees. It sees who deserves access. It sees when generosity is being honored and when it is being exploited. It sees when transparency builds trust and when it feeds opportunism. It sees when forgiveness restores connection and when it erases boundaries. This vision is what keeps your kindness alive in a world that profits from consuming it. If you are naturally kind, your task is not to become darker in soul, but wiser in structure. Let your warmth be deliberate. Let your openness be selective. Let your help be earned. Let your silence speak when words would only give away your leverage. Let your presence be something people feel lucky to receive, not something they assume will always be there, no matter how they behave. When your kindness is protected by these dark rules, it stops being a weakness others can harvest and starts becoming a force that shapes the room when you enter it. Before we continue, if you're finding truth in this so far, I'd appreciate a like. And if you want to hear from me again, make sure you're subscribed. Let's keep going. And the moment you walk into a room, something subtle changes. Not because you are louder, but because you are no longer invisible. People sense when your kindness is optional rather than automatic. They feel it when your attention is something they can earn rather than something they can drain. This shift is quiet, but it is profound. You stop bleeding energy into every interaction. You stop carrying the emotional debts of people who never intended to repay you. Music. You begin to choose where your warmth goes, and that choice alone alters the entire economy of your relationships. Most kind people don't realize they are exhausted because they believe exhaustion is the price of goodness. They wear their burnout like a badge of honor. They confuse being depleted with being virtuous. But Machiavelli would say that a ruler who drains his own treasury to feed those who do not defend the state will soon have no state left to rule. Your energy is your treasury. Your attention is your currency. If you spend it on those who devalue it, you will wake up one day empty, bitter, and confused about how your good intentions led you here. There is a hard truth hidden inside this. Some people are attracted to your kindness, not because they appreciate it, but because they can use it. They orbit you because your presence makes their lives easier. You listen when no one else will. You forgive when others would walk away. You give second chances that should have been first goodbyes. Over time, these dynamics form a quiet hierarchy. You become the emotional service provider. They become the customer. And customers do not protect the businesses they exploit. They look for better deals elsewhere while still expecting you to remain open for them. This is why Machiavelli insisted that love without the capacity for severity becomes contempt. When people sense that there is no cost to losing you, they behave as if losing you is impossible. Your presence becomes background noise. Your efforts become invisible. The dark discipline here is to make your absence felt, not as punishment, not as manipulation, but as a natural consequence of your standards. Music. When someone repeatedly disrespects your time, withdraw your availability. When someone repeatedly crosses your boundaries, withdraw your access. You are not teaching them a lesson. You are teaching yourself to value your own finite resources. Notice how uncomfortable this makes you feel. That discomfort is the residue of an old story you were told about what makes you good. You were taught that withdrawing is abandonment, that choosing yourself is selfish, that making others uncomfortable is cruel. These beliefs were meant to make you agreeable, not powerful. Machiavelli would see them as tools of control in a social order that benefits from compliant individuals. When you shed these beliefs, you are not becoming heartless. You are becoming sovereign over your own life. Sovereignty changes how you speak. You stop over-explaining. You stop negotiating your boundaries in public. You stop offering emotional discounts to people who consistently pay late. Your words become fewer but heavier. When you say yes, it means something. When you say no, it closes doors. People begin to listen, not because you demand attention, but because your attention is no longer guaranteed. Scarcity creates value. This is not cruelty. This is the basics. Psychology of how humans respond to what is rare. There is another layer to this darkness that kind people resist. You must learn to withhold approval. Approval is a powerful currency, and you give it away freely. You nod, you affirm, you encourage. You validate. This feels supportive. But it also removes a crucial signal that shapes behavior. When you approve of everything, you approve of nothing. People lose the feedback that helps them calibrate their actions. Machiavelli understood that praise should be strategic, not manipulative, but intentional. Reward behaviors you want, repeated. Withhold warmth when patterns harm you. This does not mean becoming cold, it means becoming precise. Precision is the antidote to being taken for granted. When your responses are calibrated rather than automatic, people begin to adjust around you. They sense that there is an intelligence guiding your kindness. That intelligence commands respect. The world does not trample what it senses is structured. It tramples what feels soft and unguarded. Structure does not kill warmth. It gives warmth a shape that can endure pressure. You may fear that adopting these dark rules will make you lonely. At first it might. Some people were only close to you because you made it easy. When it becomes harder to access they will drift. Let them. Their departure is not a loss of connection. It is a shedding of imbalance. What remains are relationships that can breathe without suffocating you. What remains are connections that do not require you to shrink for them to stay. Machiavelli's realism extends music to this painful truth. Not everyone in your life wants you to grow stronger. Some benefit from you staying soft. Some benefit from you staying music unsure. Some benefit from you staying endlessly available. When you begin to change, you disrupt these arrangements. Expect resistance. Expect subtle guilt. Expect accusations that you have changed, that you are colder, that you are different. You are different. You are different because you are no longer volunteering to be used as emotional infrastructure for other people's lives. There is a quiet power in letting people misunderstand you. The kind person is obsessed with being seen as good. The strategic person is more concerned with being effective. You don't need to correct every misinterpretation. You don't need to manage every narrative about you. Machiavelli would advise you to let outcomes speak. If your life becomes calmer, stronger, more directed, the story others tell about you loses its power. When you chase approval, you hand your self-image to the crowd. When you release that chase, you reclaim authorship of who you are becoming. This shift also changes how you relate to conflict. You stop avoiding it at all costs. Avoidance is not peace, it is delayed tension. When you refuse to address small disrespect, you invite larger disrespect later. The dark rule here is to confront early, calmly, and without drama. A simple boundary stated once clearly saves you from years of quiet resentment. Machiavelli would say that problems dealt with early are manageable. Problems ignored grow fangs. The kind person waits until they are overwhelmed, then explodes or disappears. The strategic kind person addresses friction when it is still light enough to move. As you practice these rules, you may notice something unsettling. Your compassion becomes more selective. You feel less urgency to fix everyone. You feel less responsible for emotions that are not yours. This can feel like a loss of innocence. In reality, it is the birth of discernment. Innocence believes everyone deserves access to you. Discernment understands that access is a privilege, not a right. You can still care deeply about humanity, while being highly selective about who gets to touch your inner life. This is where Machiavelli's darker clarity protects your lighter heart. He does not ask you to love less. He asks you to love with eyes open. To understand that love without boundaries becomes a liability. To understand that mercy without standards music invites exploitation. To understand that generosity without structure collapses under its own weight. When your kindness is governed by awareness, it becomes sustainable. When it is governed by impulse alone, it burns you out and leaves you questioning the value of goodness itself. If you have ever felt the slow erosion of your spirit, the quiet resentment toward those you help, the creeping thought that being good is a losing game, this is not a failure of your nature. It is a failure of your strategy. The world did not break you. Your unguarded openness allowed the world to take more than it was willing to give back. Strategy does not corrupt kindness. It preserves it. It ensures that your best qualities survive contact with reality rather than being crushed by it. As you integrate these dark rules, something else emerges. You begin to sense power not as domination, but as self-command. You no longer move from guilt. You move from choice. You no longer give because you are afraid of being disliked. You give because you decide that this person in this moment aligns with your values and your capacity. This kind of giving feels clean. It does not leave residue. It does not leave you resentful. It leaves you grounded in the knowledge that your kindness is an extension of your strength, not a substitute for it. There will be moments when you slip back into old patterns. You will overgive. You will over-explain. You will rescue when you should have stepped back. Do not shame yourself for this. Habits formed in kindness do not dissolve overnight. What matters is that you notice, that you recalibrate, that you remember you are not here to be consumed by the world. You are here to participate in it without being emptied by it. This is the difference between being good and being effective with your goodness. The dark wisdom of Machiavelli does not ask you to betray your values. It asks you to stop betraying yourself in the name of those values. It asks you to stop confusing passivity with virtue and vulnerability with honesty. It invites you to become someone whose kindness is backed by the quiet certainty that you can walk away, say no, withhold, and endure the discomfort of being misunderstood. When you can do that, your kindness stops being a liability and starts being a choice that reshapes the dynamics around you in ways you can feel long before you can explain them. If you enjoyed the video and would like to hear even more truth or simply support me to keep bringing content like this, you can head over to truthfully.io. First link in the description.